The morning sun cast long shadows across the training ground as Marcus Thompson adjusted his red tunic and straightened his bearskin hat. At 24 years old, he was one of the youngest members of the Queen's Guard, standing at attention outside Buckingham Palace. His lean frame and serious expression made him appear older than his years, but his fellow guards had other ideas about his capabilities. "Thompson's at it again," whispered Sergeant Williams to the guard beside him. "Look at him trying to look important." The comment drew quiet chuckles from the nearby soldiers. Marcus had been with the regiment for 18 months, and during that time, he had become the target of constant teasing from his colleagues. The mockery had started during his first week of training. During firearms practice, Marcus had missed several targets that other recruits hit easily. His hands would shake slightly when handling the rifle, and his shots often went wide of the mark. The other guards noticed immediately, and the jokes began flowing like water. "Hey, Thompson, maybe you should stick to looking pretty for the tourists," called out Private Jenkins during one particularly brutal training session. "At least you can stand still without missing." The comment earned loud laughter from the group, and Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment. Despite the constant teasing, Marcus never responded with anger or harsh words. He would simply nod politely and continue with his duties. This calm reaction only seemed to encourage his tormentors further. They saw his quiet nature as weakness, not understanding the discipline and inner strength it actually represented. Captain Harrison, the commanding officer, observed these interactions with growing concern. He had served in various military units for over 20 years and had developed a keen eye for spotting potential in soldiers. Something about Marcus Thompson intrigued him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. "Thompson seems different from the others," Captain Harrison mentioned to his aide one afternoon. "There's something about the way he carries himself, the way he observes everything around him. These boys are making a mistake by underestimating him." The daily routine at Buckingham Palace was demanding and required absolute precision. Guards had to maintain perfect posture for hours, perform ceremonial duties flawlessly, and remain alert for any potential security threats. Marcus excelled at every aspect of his duties except for marksmanship, which unfortunately became the focus of endless jokes. During lunch breaks, the guards would often gather in the mess hall and share stories about their experiences. The conversation would inevitably turn to Marcus and his supposed lack of shooting skills. "Remember last week when Thompson couldn't hit the broadside of a barn?" Private Collins would say, causing the table to erupt in laughter. "I swear the target was safer when he was aiming at it than when he wasn't." Marcus would sit quietly at his table, eating his meal and listening to the conversations around him. He never defended himself or tried to explain his performance. Instead, he would finish his food quickly and return to his duties, leaving the others to continue their entertainment at his expense. What his fellow guards didn't know was that Marcus had a secret that he kept carefully hidden. Before joining the Queen's Guard, he had spent 3 years in a specialized military unit that most people had never heard of. His service record was classified, and he was under strict orders never to discuss his previous assignments with anyone in his current position. The poor marksmanship during training was actually deliberate. Marcus had been instructed by his former commanding officer to keep his real abilities hidden while serving in his ceremonial role. The reasoning was simple but classified. Sometimes the best soldiers are those who appear to be the least capable. During quiet moments alone, Marcus would think about his previous life and the missions he had completed. The contrast between his current situation and his past experiences was almost amusing. His fellow guards saw him as incompetent, while his former teammates knew him as one of the most skilled operators they had ever worked with. The teasing reached its peak during a particularly busy tourist season. Thousands of visitors gathered daily to watch the changing of the guard ceremony, and the pressure on the soldiers to maintain perfect discipline was intense. During one ceremony, Private Jenkins made a loud comment about Marcus's shooting skills just as a group of schoolchildren walked by. "Don't worry, kids. If anyone tries to hurt you, Thompson here will scare them away by missing them completely," Jenkins said with a smirk. The comment was overheard by several tourists, and Marcus felt the familiar sting of public humiliation. That evening, Captain Harrison called Marcus into his office for a private conversation. The captain had been watching the situation develop for months and was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the treatment his soldier was receiving. "Thompson, I want you to know that I've been observing your performance, Captain Harrison began. While your marksmanship scores are below average, your dedication to duty and professionalism are exceptional. Don't let the others get to you. Marcus stood at attention and replied simply, "Thank you, sir. I understand their concerns about my abilities." Captain Harrison studied the young guard carefully. There was something in Marcus's eyes that suggested depths the captain hadn't yet explored. "Is there anything you'd like to tell me about your background, Thompson? Anything that might help me understand you better?" For a moment, Marcus considered revealing the truth about his past. The temptation to defend himself and show his real capabilities was strong. However, his training and discipline held firm. "No, sir. Nothing relevant to my current duties." As Marcus left the captain's office, he made a decision that would soon change everything. He had endured months of mockery and humiliation while maintaining his cover, but circumstances were about to arise that would force him to reveal his true nature. The question was whether his fellow guards would be ready for the revelation that was coming their way. The stage was set for a demonstration that would shock everyone who thought they knew Marcus Thompson. His patience and careful planning were about to pay off in ways that none of his tormentors could possibly imagine. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the guard quarters as Marcus polished his boots in silence. Around him, his fellow guards continued their usual evening routine of cards, conversation, and casual mockery directed at anyone they considered an easy target. Tonight, however, the atmosphere felt different. Word had spread through the barracks about an upcoming visit that would change their normal routine dramatically. "Did you hear about next week?" Private Collins announced to the room. "We're getting some special visitors from the SAS. They're coming to evaluate our security procedures." The mention of the Special Air Service immediately captured everyone's attention. The SAS was legendary among British military personnel, known for producing the most elite soldiers in the world. Sergeant Williams looked up from his newspaper with interest. "SAS, what do they want with us?" "We're ceremonial guards, not special forces." The question hung in the air as several guards gathered around Collins for more information. "Apparently there have been some security concerns raised about the palace," Collins explained, lowering his voice. "Nothing specific, but the higher-ups want to make sure our defensive capabilities are up to standard. The SAS team is coming to run some exercises with us." Marcus continued polishing his boots, but his attention was now completely focused on the conversation. This development could potentially complicate his carefully maintained cover. SAS personnel were trained to recognize talent and spot deception. If anyone could see through his act of mediocrity, it would be them. Private Jenkins, never one to miss an opportunity for humor, immediately seized on the implications. "Well, this should be interesting. I wonder what the SAS will think when they see Thompson's shooting skills." The comment drew the expected laughter from the group. "Maybe they'll use him as a demonstration of what not to do," added another guard. "Thompson could show them how to miss a target from 5 feet away." The jokes continued for several minutes, with Marcus remaining silent throughout the exchange. Captain Harrison entered the quarters during the height of the laughter. His serious expression immediately sobered the mood in the room. "Gentlemen, I have official information about next week's exercises. The SAS team will be conducting a comprehensive evaluation of our readiness and response capabilities." The captain's eyes briefly met Marcus's before continuing. "This is not a game or entertainment. These men are professionals of the highest caliber, and they will be judging every aspect of our performance. I expect absolute professionalism from each of you." After Captain Harrison left, the speculation resumed with even greater intensity. The guards began discussing what the SAS evaluation might involve, and how they would perform under such scrutiny. Most were confident in their abilities, but a few showed signs of nervousness about being judged by such elite soldiers. "I'm not worried," declared Private Jenkins with his usual bravado. "We're all properly trained guards." How different can it be? His confidence was shared by most of the others, who saw the upcoming evaluation as an opportunity to prove themselves. Marcus, however, understood the reality of what was coming. SAS evaluations were notoriously thorough and unforgiving. These men would test every aspect of their skills: physical fitness, mental toughness, and tactical awareness. Many regular soldiers found such assessments humbling experiences that revealed weaknesses they never knew they had. The following days passed with increased training, intensity as the guards prepared for the evaluation. Captain Harrison pushed them harder than usual, running extra drills and reviewing procedures that hadn't been practiced in months. The anticipation created a mixture of excitement and anxiety throughout the unit. During one particularly intense training session, Marcus deliberately maintained his pattern of poor marksmanship. As his shots continued to miss their targets, the familiar comments and jokes followed. However, he noticed Captain Harrison watching him more carefully than usual, as if trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "Thompson, stay after the others are dismissed," Captain Harrison ordered at the end of the session. When they were alone, the captain approached with a concerned expression. "Son, I'm worried about how you'll perform during the SAS evaluation. Is there anything we can do to improve your shooting before they arrive?" Marcus stood at attention and considered his options carefully. The temptation to reveal his true abilities was stronger than ever, but his orders remained clear. "Sir, I will do my best to represent the unit properly during the evaluation." Captain Harrison studied him for a long moment. "Thompson, I've been in the military for over 20 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts about people. There's something about you that doesn't add up. Your discipline, your composure under pressure, your attention to detail. These are all qualities of an exceptional soldier. Yet your marksmanship suggests otherwise." The captain's observation was more perceptive than Marcus had expected. He maintained his neutral expression while considering how to respond. "Sir, some soldiers excel in different areas. Perhaps marksmanship simply isn't my strength." "Perhaps," Captain Harrison replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "However, I want you to know that regardless of your shooting scores, I value your service to this unit. Don't let the others' comments affect your confidence." That evening, Marcus lay in his bunk thinking about the approaching evaluation. His fellow guards continued to joke about his expected poor performance, unaware that they were about to witness something that would fundamentally change their perception of him. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Marcus. For months, he had endured mockery and humiliation while hiding his true capabilities. Soon he would be evaluated by soldiers who would immediately recognize his real skills. The question was whether he could maintain his cover while still performing well enough to satisfy the SAS requirements. As the lights went out in the barracks, Marcus made a mental note to contact his former commanding officer. The upcoming evaluation might require him to reveal more of his abilities than originally planned, and he needed guidance on how to handle the situation without completely blowing his cover. The next morning brought news that would accelerate everything. Captain Harrison announced that the SAS evaluation had been moved up by 3 days due to scheduling changes. This meant they had less time to prepare, but it also meant that Marcus's moment of revelation was approaching much faster than anyone expected. The black vehicles arrived at dawn, moving through the palace gates with military precision that immediately commanded respect. Marcus watched from his post as 3 unmarked Range Rovers pulled up to the main entrance, their tinted windows hiding the occupants from view. Even from a distance, he could sense the controlled energy that surrounded these vehicles and their passengers. Captain Harrison appeared at the main entrance, his dress uniform immaculate and his posture reflecting the importance of the moment. The first vehicle's doors opened and 4 men in civilian clothes stepped out. Despite their casual appearance, everything about them screamed military elite. Their movements were economical and purposeful, their eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, with the awareness that came from years of operating in dangerous environments. The lead figure was a man in his early 40s with graying temples and the kind of weathered face that spoke of countless missions in hostile territories. His name was Colonel James Mitchell, though the guards would only know him as Colonel M during the evaluation. Behind him came 3 other operatives, each carrying themselves with the same quiet confidence that marked truly dangerous men. Marcus felt a familiar stirring in his chest as he observed these soldiers. They reminded him of his former teammates, men who lived in the shadows and operated where conventional forces couldn't go. For months, he had been surrounded by ceremonial guards who, while professional, lacked the edge that came from real combat experience. Seeing these SAS operatives brought back memories of a life he had been forced to leave behind. "All guards report to the main briefing room immediately," came the announcement over the internal communication system. Marcus secured his post and joined the stream of red-uniformed soldiers making their way toward the meeting. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation and nervous energy. The briefing room fell silent as Colonel Mitchell entered, followed by his team. His presence filled the space with an authority that needed no introduction or explanation. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had earned respect through actions rather than rank alone. "Gentlemen, I am Colonel Mitchell, and these are Sergeants Adams, Clark, and Thompson." The mention of Thompson caused a few guards to glance at Marcus with amusement, as if the shared name was somehow significant. "We are here to evaluate your readiness to handle security threats that go beyond your normal ceremonial duties." Colonel Mitchell's eyes swept across the assembled guards, pausing briefly on each face as if cataloging their potential. When his gaze reached Marcus, it lingered for just a moment longer than the others, though his expression revealed nothing. "Over the next 3 days, we will test your marksmanship, tactical awareness, physical fitness, and ability to respond to crisis situations," the colonel continued. "This is not a competition between you and us. This is an assessment of your capabilities to protect one of the most important locations in the United Kingdom." Private Jenkins shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier bravado beginning to fade as the reality of the situation became clear. The other guards showed similar signs of growing nervousness, as they began to understand that this would be unlike any training they had experienced before. "We will begin with individual marksmanship assessments in 1 hour," Colonel Mitchell announced. "Each of you will fire 50 rounds at various distances and target types. The standards are non-negotiable, and the results will be recorded in your permanent files." As the guards filed out of the briefing room, the conversations were notably quieter than usual. The reality of being evaluated by the SAS had sobered even the most confident soldiers. Private Collins whispered to his companions, "50 rounds? They're really going to put us through our paces." Marcus walked silently among his colleagues, his mind racing through the implications of what was about to happen. He had 2 choices: continue his charade of poor marksmanship and risk failing the evaluation completely, or reveal his true abilities and potentially blow his cover. Neither option was appealing, but one was clearly more dangerous than the other. Captain Harrison approached Marcus as they reached the armory. "Thompson, I want you to know that whatever happens today, you should shoot to the best of your ability. Don't let the pressure get to you." The captain's concern was genuine, though he had no idea of the real pressure Marcus was facing. The shooting range had been transformed from its usual setup. Multiple target systems were arranged at distances ranging from 25 meters to 200 meters. Some targets were stationary, while others were designed to move in unpredictable patterns. It was clear that this would test skills far beyond basic marksmanship. Colonel Mitchell stood at the firing line with a clipboard, observing as each guard took their turn. His 3 sergeants positioned themselves at various points around the range, their trained eyes missing nothing as they evaluated each soldier's performance. The first few guards performed adequately, hitting most of their targets but showing the limitations of their ceremonial training. Private Jenkins managed a respectable score, though his hands shook noticeably during the longer distance shots. Private Collins struggled with the moving targets, cursing under his breath as several shots went wide. As Marcus's turn approached, he felt the familiar weight of decision pressing down on him. His fellow guards had gathered behind the firing line, many of them grinning in anticipation of watching him embarrass himself once again. Comments like "this should be good" and "poor Thompson" drifted through the group. Colonel Mitchell called his name and Marcus stepped forward to the firing line. He picked up the rifle with the same careful movements he had displayed during training, giving no indication of the expertise that lay beneath his calm exterior. "Thompson, isn't it?" Colonel Mitchell said quietly, his voice carrying only to Marcus's ears. "Interesting name. I once knew a Thompson who was quite skilled with a rifle." Marcus met the colonel's eyes briefly before responding. "Yes, sir, Thompson is a common name." "Indeed it is," the colonel replied, though something in his tone suggested he was thinking about more than just names. "Proceed when ready." Marcus raised his rifle and prepared to make the most important decision of his assignment. Around him, his fellow guards waited for another display of incompetence, while the SAS operatives prepared to witness something entirely different. The moment of truth had finally arrived, and there would be no going back from whatever choice he made in the next few seconds. Marcus took his position at the firing line, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. Behind him, his fellow guards whispered among themselves, preparing for what they assumed would be another embarrassing display of poor marksmanship. Some had even started making quiet bets on how many targets he would miss completely. "Remember Thompson?" Private Jenkins called out with barely concealed amusement. "Try to at least hit the target board this time." The comment drew muffled laughter from several other guards, though Captain Harrison quickly silenced them with a sharp look. Colonel Mitchell stood beside Marcus, his presence both intimidating and oddly comforting. The colonel's experienced eyes noted details that others missed: the way Marcus controlled his breathing, how he positioned his feet for optimal stability, and the completely relaxed grip he maintained on the rifle despite the pressure of the moment. "Begin when ready," Colonel Mitchell said quietly, his voice carrying an undertone that suggested he expected something different from what the other guards had witnessed before. Marcus raised his rifle and sighted the first target at 25 meters. For months he had deliberately missed shots much easier than this one. The muscle memory of his real training fought against the careful deception he had maintained. His finger found the trigger, and time seemed to slow as he made his final decision. The first shot rang out across the range with crisp precision. The target monitor immediately displayed a perfect center hit, causing a moment of stunned silence among the watching guards. Private Collins blinked several times, as if trying to process what he had just witnessed. "Lucky shot," whispered Private Jenkins, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Marcus smoothly transitioned to the second target at 50 meters. His movements were fluid and professional, showing none of the hesitation or uncertainty that had characterized his previous range sessions. The second shot produced another perfect hit, followed immediately by a third and fourth. Behind the firing line, the atmosphere began to change dramatically. The guards who had been preparing to laugh at Marcus's expense now watched in growing amazement as target after target displayed perfect or near-perfect hits. Their confident smirks faded into expressions of confusion and disbelief. Colonel Mitchell observed Marcus's performance with the trained eye of someone who had seen the world's best marksman in action. Every aspect of the young guard's technique spoke of extensive professional training far beyond what any ceremonial unit would provide. The controlled breathing, the smooth trigger control, the seamless transitions between targets. These were the skills of an elite operator. By the 10th shot, even the SAS sergeants had stopped their other activities to watch Marcus's performance. Sergeant Adams moved closer to get a better view, his experienced eye recognizing skill that rivaled their own unit's best shooters. "What the hell?" Private Collins whispered to the guard beside him. "Where did this come from?" The question voiced what everyone was thinking as they watched their supposedly incompetent colleague demonstrate abilities that surpassed anything they had seen before. Marcus continued through the increasingly difficult stages of the evaluation. Moving targets that had challenged the other guards posed no problem for him. Long-distance shots that required precise wind and elevation calculations were executed with mechanical precision. Each shot seemed to build upon the last, creating a display of marksmanship that left everyone stunned. Captain Harrison stood transfixed, his mind racing to understand what he was witnessing. The soldier he had known for 18 months was revealing capabilities that contradicted everything he thought he knew about Marcus Thompson. The captain's earlier suspicions about his guard suddenly seemed inadequate to explain the transformation taking place before his eyes. "Sergeant Williams," Captain Harrison called quietly, "check Thompson's training records again. I want to know everything about his background." His voice carried a mixture of amazement and concern as he watched Marcus continue his flawless performance. Private Jenkins had gone completely silent. His usual stream of jokes and comments dried up in the face of what he was witnessing. The same man he had mocked for months was demonstrating skills that made his own marksmanship look amateur by comparison. The cognitive dissonance was almost overwhelming. As Marcus reached the final stage of the evaluation, the targets became smaller and more challenging. These were shots that would test even experienced marksmen, requiring not just accuracy but also the mental fortitude to maintain performance under pressure. The range fell completely silent except for the measured crack of Marcus's rifle and the electronic confirmation of each perfect hit. Colonel Mitchell made notes on his clipboard, though his expression remained carefully neutral. However, his sergeants showed less restraint in their reactions. Sergeant Thompson, the SAS operative who shared Marcus's surname, leaned over to his colonel and whispered something that caused Mitchell to nod thoughtfully. The final shot echoed across the range, followed by the electronic display confirming another perfect hit. Marcus lowered his rifle and stepped back from the firing line, his expression calm and professional despite having just delivered a performance that had shocked everyone present. 50 for 50, announced the range officer, his voice carrying a note of amazement. Perfect score. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, confirming what everyone had witnessed but struggled to believe. Behind him, Marcus could hear the whispered conversations of his fellow guards as they tried to process what had just happened. Phrases like impossible and where did that come from drifted through the group, along with the sound of rapidly changing opinions about their colleague. Colonel Mitchell approached Marcus with measured steps, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp with interest. Excellent shooting, Thompson. Where did you receive your marksmanship training? The question was casual in tone, but Marcus recognized it as the beginning of a much more serious conversation. Standard military training, sir, Marcus replied, maintaining the neutral expression he had perfected over months of hiding his true nature. Standard training, the colonel repeated thoughtfully. That's quite remarkable considering what we just witnessed. His tone suggested he found Marcus's explanation somewhat inadequate. As the other guards began to gather around, their earlier mockery replaced by curiosity and amazement, Marcus realized that his carefully maintained cover was beginning to unravel. The performance he had just delivered was impossible to explain away as lucky shots or sudden improvement. Questions would be asked, investigations might be launched, and his true background could be exposed. The moment he had dreaded and anticipated for months had finally arrived. The secret he had protected so carefully was now hanging by a thread, and the next few minutes would determine whether his mission could continue or if everything would have to change. The silence that followed Marcus's perfect shooting performance stretched uncomfortably long. His fellow guards stood in a loose semicircle behind him, their faces displaying a mixture of shock, confusion, and dawning embarrassment as they realized how wrong they had been about their colleagues' abilities. Private Jenkins was the first to find his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Thompson, how did you... we've seen you shoot before. You couldn't hit anything. His statement reflected the thoughts of everyone present, and the accusatory tone suggested he felt deceived rather than impressed. Marcus turned to face his colleagues, his expression remaining calm despite the storm of emotions he felt inside. For months he had endured their mockery and jokes about his supposed incompetence. Now, seeing their stunned faces, he experienced no satisfaction or desire for revenge. Instead, he felt a profound sadness about the deception he had been forced to maintain. Sometimes people improve with practice, Marcus replied simply, though everyone present knew that such improvement was impossible without extensive professional training that went far beyond anything available to ceremonial guards. Colonel Mitchell stepped forward, his experienced eyes studying Marcus with renewed intensity. Thompson, I think we need to have a private conversation. Captain Harrison, may I borrow your soldier for a few minutes? Captain Harrison, still reeling from what he had witnessed, nodded numbly. Of course, Colonel. Thompson, you're with the Colonel. His voice carried a note of concern as he watched Marcus follow the SAS officer away from the group. As they walked toward a secluded office, Colonel Mitchell maintained his silence, allowing the weight of the situation to settle. Marcus knew that this conversation would be unlike any he had experienced since joining the Queen's Guard. SAS officers were trained to extract information and detect deception with skills that far exceeded those of regular military personnel. Please, have a seat, Colonel Mitchell said as they entered a small conference room. He closed the door carefully and activated a device that Marcus recognized as a signal jammer, ensuring their conversation would remain private. Now then, Thompson, let's discuss your rather remarkable performance. Marcus sat at attention, his training keeping him focused despite the dangerous territory they were entering. Sir, I performed to the best of my ability as instructed. Indeed you did, the colonel replied, settling into the chair across from him. The question is why your best ability today differs so dramatically from your performance over the past 18 months. I've reviewed your training records and they paint a picture of a soldier who struggles with basic marksmanship. The colonel opened a file that Marcus hadn't seen him carrying. Missed targets, poor groupings, shaky performance under pressure. These records suggest someone who shouldn't have been able to achieve what we just witnessed. Unless, of course, those records were deliberately falsified. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, though his expression remained neutral. Sir, I've been working hard to improve my skills. Perhaps the pressure of the evaluation brought out abilities I didn't know I possessed. Colonel Mitchell leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thompson, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've seen soldiers crack under pressure. I've seen lucky shots, and I've seen gradual improvement through training. What I witnessed today was none of those things. The colonel leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. What I saw was muscle memory, professional technique, and skills that take years of specialized training to develop. The kind of training that creates operators, not ceremonial guards. Marcus remained silent, knowing that anything he said could potentially make the situation worse. Colonel Mitchell was clearly fishing for information, but he was doing it with the skill of someone who had interrogated far more dangerous subjects than a Queen's Guard. Let me share something with you, Thompson. The colonel continued. 3 years ago, an SAS unit completed a classified operation that required one of their best marksmen to take some very difficult shots under extreme pressure. That marksman's name was also Thompson, though his first name was Marcus. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus felt his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. Colonel Mitchell clearly knew more than he was letting on, and the pretense of ignorance was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. That Marcus Thompson was transferred to a classified assignment 18 months ago. The colonel continued. Officially, he doesn't exist anymore. Unofficially, he's one of the most skilled operators I've ever had the privilege to work with. Marcus met the colonel's eyes directly for the first time during the conversation. The game was over, and they both knew it. The question now was how much damage his blown cover would cause to whatever operation had placed him in the Queen's Guard. Sir, I'm not sure what you're implying, Marcus said carefully, though his tone suggested he understood perfectly. Colonel Mitchell smiled more broadly now. I'm not implying anything, Thompson. I'm stating facts. The question is whether you're going to continue this charade, or if we're going to have an honest conversation about what you're really doing here. Before Marcus could respond, the colonel's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He glanced at the screen and his expression became more serious. Interesting. It seems we have a developing situation that might require your particular skills much sooner than anyone anticipated. The colonel showed Marcus the message, which contained a brief security alert about suspicious activity detected near the palace perimeter. It was exactly the kind of situation that Marcus's real assignment had been designed to prepare for. So, Operator Thompson, Colonel Mitchell said, using Marcus's real title for the first time. Are you ready to stop pretending to be incompetent and start doing what you were actually sent here to do? Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as his cover finally collapsed completely. The months of careful deception were over, but now he would have to face the consequences of his revealed identity. More importantly, it appeared that the theoretical threat his assignment had been designed to counter might be becoming very real. Sir, I believe we need to contact my handler immediately, Marcus replied, abandoning his pretense for the first time in 18 months. If there's a real security threat developing, there are protocols that need to be activated. Colonel Mitchell nodded approvingly. Now that's the response I was expecting from an SAS operator. Let's go protect the crown, shall we? Within minutes of Colonel Mitchell's revelation, the Palace Security Center transformed into a hub of controlled activity. Marcus found himself in an underground command room he had never seen before, despite 18 months of service at the palace. Advanced monitoring equipment lined the walls, displaying feeds from dozens of security cameras positioned throughout the grounds and surrounding areas. Thompson, meet Commander Sarah Bradley, Colonel Mitchell said, introducing a woman in her late 30s who carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. She's been your handler throughout this assignment, though you've never met face-to-face. Commander Bradley studied Marcus with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about him. Operator Thompson, your cover assignment is now officially terminated. We have a credible threat that requires your immediate attention and full capabilities. Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with professional excitement as he shed the persona he had maintained for so long. Ma'am, what's the nature of the threat? Intelligence suggests a coordinated attack planned for tomorrow during the state dinner, Commander Bradley explained. pulling up detailed schematics on the main display. 3 foreign agents have been identified within a 20-mile radius of the palace, and their communications indicate they have inside knowledge of our security procedures. Colonel Mitchell pointed to specific locations on the map. The concerning part is that they seem to know details about guard rotations, response protocols, and blind spots in our surveillance coverage. Information that should only be available to someone with high-level access. You suspect an inside source, Marcus observed, his mind immediately shifting into operational mode after months of forced inactivity. We know there's an inside source, Commander Bradley confirmed grimly. We just don't know who it is yet. That's where you come in. Your position as a seemingly incompetent guard has given you access to observe your colleagues without arousing suspicion. Marcus thought back over the past 18 months, reviewing conversations and behaviors he had witnessed while maintaining his cover. Several incidents that had seemed innocent at the time now took on new significance in light of this information. There have been some unusual patterns, Marcus began, his trained memory providing details that might prove crucial. Private Collins has been asking questions about security procedures that seemed odd for someone in his position. He's also been staying late after duty shifts, claiming to catch up on paperwork. Commander Bradley made notes as Marcus continued his analysis. Sergeant Williams has also shown unusual interest in the guard rotation schedules, particularly for high-profile events. He's requested specific duty assignments that would give him access to sensitive areas. Anyone else? Colonel Mitchell asked, recognizing the value of Marcus's observations from his unique position within the unit. Captain Harrison has been under stress lately, Marcus added thoughtfully. His behavior suggests he's dealing with pressure from sources outside the normal chain of command. He's also been asking probing questions about my background recently. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Marcus. While his fellow guards had been mocking his supposed incompetence, he had been conducting surveillance on all of them as part of his real mission. The months of endured humiliation suddenly seemed worthwhile, as his observations potentially identified security threats. We need to move quickly, Commander Bradley announced. The state dinner is in less than 24 hours, and we can't afford to let this threat materialize. Thompson, you'll work directly with Colonel Mitchell's team to identify and neutralize the inside source. Marcus nodded, feeling the familiar rush of operational readiness that had been suppressed for so long. What about my colleagues? They're going to have questions about my sudden change in capabilities. Let them wonder, Colonel Mitchell replied. Right now, one of them might be planning to help kill members of the royal family. We don't have time for explanations or hurt feelings. The next several hours passed in intense preparation and analysis. Marcus worked with the SAS team to review security footage, analyze communication patterns, and develop profiles of potential suspects within the Queen's Guard. His intimate knowledge of his colleagues' habits and behaviors proved invaluable in identifying anomalies that might have been missed by outside observers. Meanwhile, back in the guard quarters, the other soldiers were struggling to process what they had witnessed during the shooting evaluation. Private Jenkins sat on his bunk, staring at the wall as he tried to reconcile months of mocking Marcus with the reality of his demonstrated skills. I don't understand any of this, Private Collins said to the group. Thompson couldn't hit a target 3 feet away last week, and today he shoots like he's been doing it professionally for years. Sergeant Williams paced nervously around the room, his agitation more pronounced than usual. Something isn't right about this whole situation. The SAS shows up, Thompson suddenly becomes a marksman, and now he disappears with their commanding officer. Captain Harrison entered the quarters, his face grave with concern. Gentlemen, I need to speak with each of you individually about Thompson's background and behavior. Report to my office one at a time, starting with Collins. As the guards prepared for their individual interviews, none of them realized that their own loyalty and trustworthiness were now under intense scrutiny. The colleague they had mocked and dismissed had become the key to identifying a traitor in their midst. In the command center, Marcus continued his analysis with growing urgency. The state dinner would bring together high-ranking officials from multiple countries, creating a target-rich environment for any would-be assassins. The inside information that the foreign agents possessed could turn the normally secure event into a disaster. We're running out of time, Commander Bradley announced as evening approached. Thompson, based on your observations, who do you consider the most likely suspect? Marcus reviewed his mental notes one final time before answering. His months of careful observation while maintaining his cover were about to pay off in ways that could save lives and prevent an international incident. The decision he made in the next few moments would determine not only the success of his mission, but potentially the safety of the royal family itself. Marcus stood before the tactical display, his mind processing 18 months of carefully observed details about his fellow guards. The weight of the decision pressed down on him as he realized that his assessment could determine the success or failure of preventing a catastrophic attack on the royal family. Based on behavioral patterns, access opportunities, and recent changes in routine, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. I believe Sergeant Williams is our most likely suspect. He's been displaying signs of stress that predate the SAS arrival, and his questions about security procedures have been unusually specific and persistent. Commander Bradley nodded thoughtfully. Elaborate on the specific indicators you've observed. Williams has been making unauthorized copies of duty rosters, Marcus explained. I noticed him photographing scheduling documents with his personal phone on 3 separate occasions. He claimed he was checking his own assignments, but the documents contained information about guard positions throughout the palace. Colonel Mitchell leaned forward with interest. What else? He's also been arriving early for shifts and staying late, giving him access to areas and information beyond his normal duties. Most significantly, he's been asking other guards about emergency protocols and evacuation procedures, claiming it was for training purposes. The analysis was interrupted by an urgent alert from the surveillance team. We have movement on the perimeter cameras, announced a technician. 3 individuals approaching from different directions, all matching descriptions of our suspected foreign agents. The main display switched to live camera feeds showing figures moving through the darkness around the palace grounds. Their movements were coordinated and professional, suggesting military or intelligence training. Most concerning was their apparent knowledge of camera blind spots and patrol routes. They're moving exactly as they would if someone had provided them with detailed intelligence about our security setup, Colonel Mitchell observed grimly. This confirms we have a leak. Commander Bradley activated her communication device. All units, we have confirmed hostile movement on the perimeter. Implement lockdown protocols immediately. No one enters or leaves the palace grounds without direct authorization. Marcus watched the tactical display as red dots representing the intruders moved closer to the palace. They're heading for the service entrances that would be manned by guards during the state dinner tomorrow. Someone definitely provided them with inside information. Thompson, I need you to locate Sergeant Williams immediately, Commander Bradley ordered. Don't approach him directly. Just observe and report his location and activities. Marcus moved swiftly through the palace corridors, his training allowing him to navigate the familiar spaces with new purpose and authority. The transformation from mocked ceremonial guard to operational SAS officer felt like removing heavy chains that had constrained him for months. He found Sergeant Williams in the communications room, alone and working intently at a computer terminal. The sergeant's posture was tense and he kept glancing toward the door as if expecting to be interrupted. Marcus positioned himself where he could observe without being detected. Williams was accessing files that were clearly beyond his authorization level, downloading information about tomorrow's security arrangements for the state dinner. Most damning was the encrypted messaging application open on a second screen, showing communications with unknown contacts. Marcus activated his radio quietly. Command, this is Thompson. I have eyes on Williams in the communications room. He's accessing classified files and appears to be transmitting information to outside contacts. Understood, came Commander Bradley's voice. Maintain observation but do not engage. We're moving SAS teams into position now. As Marcus watched, Williams suddenly stiffened and began rapidly closing files and applications. Someone had apparently warned him that his activities had been discovered. The sergeant stood quickly and headed for the door, forcing Marcus to retreat to avoid detection. Command, Williams is mobile and appears to have been alerted. He's moving toward the East Wing exit. The response was immediate. All teams converge on the East Wing. Suspect is attempting to flee. What followed was a carefully orchestrated operation that demonstrated the vast difference between ceremonial guards and elite military operatives. SAS teams moved through the palace with precision and speed that left no room for escape or resistance. Williams was intercepted before he could reach the exit, surrounded by armed professionals who gave him no opportunity to resist or destroy evidence. The relief on his face when he was captured suggested that the stress of his double life had become unbearable. "Sergeant Williams, you're under arrest for treason and conspiracy," Colonel Mitchell announced as the suspect was secured. "Your cooperation in identifying the foreign agents will be noted during your prosecution." The 3 intruders on the perimeter were captured within minutes, once their inside source was eliminated. Without current intelligence about palace security, they were easy targets for the SAS teams who had been tracking their movements. As dawn broke over the palace, Marcus found himself back in the guard quarters, facing his former colleagues who were still struggling to understand the night's events. Private Jenkins approached him hesitantly, his usual arrogance replaced by obvious confusion and embarrassment. "Thompson." "Marcus, I owe you an apology," Jenkins began awkwardly. "We all do. We had no idea who you really were or what you were doing here." Marcus looked around at the faces of the guards who had mocked him for 18 months. Instead of anger or satisfaction, he felt only sadness for the deception that had been necessary, and understanding for their confusion. "You had no way of knowing," Marcus replied simply. "You were doing your jobs and I was doing mine. The important thing is that everyone is safe." Captain Harrison entered the quarters, his expression reflecting the complex emotions of the moment. "Thompson, I've been informed about your real assignment and the events of last night. I want to thank you for your service and apologize for not recognizing your true capabilities. Sir, maintaining my cover required convincing everyone, including you. You have nothing to apologize for." Later that afternoon, as the state dinner proceeded without incident, Marcus stood at his ceremonial post wearing his red tunic and bearskin hat. To tourists and visiting dignitaries, he appeared to be just another Queen's Guard performing traditional duties. His fellow guards now looked at him with a mixture of respect, embarrassment, and curiosity. The dynamic had changed completely, but Marcus treated them exactly as he had before, with quiet professionalism and respect. Colonel Mitchell approached during a quiet moment. "Thompson, your assignment here is complete. You'll be returning to active SAS duties next week." Marcus nodded, feeling both relief and a strange nostalgia for the role he was leaving behind. "Sir, it's been an honor to serve in both capacities." "The honor was ours," the colonel replied. "Your patience and professionalism under very trying circumstances prevented what could have been a national tragedy." As the sun set over Buckingham Palace, Marcus reflected on the 18 months that had tested his character in ways that combat missions never had. He had endured mockery and humiliation while protecting people who didn't even know they needed protection. The royal family was safe, a traitor had been caught, and international relations had been preserved. Most importantly, he had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from displays of strength, but from the quiet courage to endure misunderstanding while serving something greater than oneself. The teasing was over, but the memory of why he had endured it would stay with him forever.